Relations between Britain and France are anything but cordial this morning, with the French ambassador to the UK hauled into the Foreign Office in the rapidly escalating row over post-Brexit fishing rights. But the question is, how can the situation be diffused? Well, I'll be speaking to the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, in just a few minutes. Also ahead, well-known women are joining in this year's Movember campaign for men's health. And I'll be speaking to the Chief Executive later in the programme. Plus,
Say, hello Americans. Hello America. Hello Thai Navy. Hello Chinese.
And we'll be speaking to the director of a new film about the incredible rescue of 12 young boys from an underwater cave in Thailand, as well as one of the divers who helped to save them. It's Friday, the 29th of October. Troubled waters, the French ambassador to the UK is summoned to the Foreign Office as the dispute over the post-Brexit fishing rights escalates.
Our door remains open. If logbooks are provided that show those vessels have fished in our waters, they will be entitled to a licence under the...
It doesn't fly with me. On the eve of COP26, the woman who led the Paris Climate Summit criticises the Chancellor's decision to cut taxes on short-haul flights.
The way that it lands internationally is not good. And I do think that the Prime Minister is going to have some explaining to do.
A flight to fight climate change. President Biden arrives in Rome to meet the Pope ahead of a G20 summit and COP26. Underpaid and overworked, a special report on the migrant staff being exploited and facing insecurity. Sending a friend request, Facebook encourages users to embrace a name change. But is Meta better? Well, I'll be asking the European boss after 8. And weather looks like it will be showery for most of us, so do grab a brolly. Hello, good morning. The French ambassador to the UK is due to meet the Foreign Secretary later after a British scallop trawler was detained, escalating the row over post-Brexit fishing rights. Liz Truss has summoned the ambassador to explain what's been described as disproportionate and disappointing threats by France. Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to the Environment Secretary, George Eustice. But first, our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, reports from Calais.
The Cornelis Gertjan, brought into harbour and seized by French police, who say it has no licence to operate in French waters. The owners say they've stuck to all the rules, but their boat is caught in a much bigger dispute here. France wants more fishing permits. The UK says it has to stick to rules before granting them, and frustration has given way to brinkmanship. The French ambassador has been summoned by the Foreign Secretary, but France is unrepentant. The government here in Jersey, where the waters are the most disputed, says it's extremely disappointed by the French government threats and insists it is giving licences to fishermen who are entitled to them.
Our door remains open. If logbooks are provided that show those vessels have fished in our waters, they will be entitled to a licence under the trade deal. We've acted with goodwill. We've provided an amnesty period.
Here in Boulogne-sur-Mer, fishing really is the backbone of the community, and plenty here are happy to see their government standing up for them.
Ouais, moi je trouve que c'est bien, ça va peut-être les faire bouger un petit peu, je trouve. Peut-être qu'ils vont réfléchir et puis ils auront peut-être les permis de bateau pour aller là-bas dans les zones anglaises. On verra bien. On va attendre mardi.
France says that unless there is progress on a deal, then it will stop British boats from entering its ports as soon as Tuesday. Plenty of British produce crosses the channel. Stopping that flow will be damaging to both sides. The French are also threatening more checks on freight going in and out of the UK. That would mean these queues getting worse.
Alors certes, le Royaume-Uni a décidé de quitter l'Europe, c'est une chose. Ça ne se fait pas sans conséquence, puisqu'il y a des procédures à respecter, des formalités à respecter, à remplir dans un sens comme dans l'autre. Mais je pense que les choses vont se calmer, j'espère vont se calmer, que les licences qui doivent être données seront données et que le commerce continuera à l'approche des fêtes de fin d'année.
At first, this looked like just another squabble between the UK and the European Union, but now it's grown into something else, a full-blown diplomatic battle between the United Kingdom and France. And if the French do go ahead with their threat to ban British fishing vessels or to gum up customs checks at ports like Calais, that would be incendiary, would have big repercussions on both sides of the Channel. The reality is that this is a row about a small slice of a small industry. Fishing has long been a fault line in the big Brexit picture. Now it is cracking open. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Calais.
Well, I'm now joined by the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, who joins us in the studio now. Thank you very much indeed for your time here on Sky News this morning. I think the big question that most of us want to know is, are we at war with France?
Well, we're not, and the reality is that over the last 9 months or so, we've actually licensed close to 1,700 EU vessels. Nearly 750 of those have been French vessels. What we're talking about here is a very small proportion of vessels that the French put forward to be licensed, but the truth is they just don't have a track record of fishing in the areas where they needed to be in order to qualify for one. So 98% of the vessels were given a licence much earlier this year. Even in Jersey, they've now issued over 160 licences to French vessels. But there will always be a small proportion that don't qualify, and that's what we're talking about here.
So what is it that you're going to do then to ease the tensions at the moment that we're seeing?
Well, look, we think that the comments that have been made by France on this are, completely disproportionate. They're unacceptable. The things that they are suggesting doing, which is basically start to be difficult at the borders and close ports and so on. This is a clear breach, not only of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've got with them, but also of EU law, the official control regime. And so we don't really think it's justified at all, because this is a very small number of vessels that just don't qualify under the terms of the agreement that was reached. And so what we're asking France to do is obviously try to calm this down and remove these threats. They're not acceptable.
So what you've said is that the threats are not acceptable. Another thing you've also said is that what you're going to do is make sure that they're met with a proportionate level of, consequence, basically, if those threats are carried out. Can you just explain to us what that looks like from your point of view?
Well, the first thing is, as the UK, the way that we approach these things in the way that you should is we will be talking to the European Commission. In fact, I spoke to the Commissioner 2 days ago when these threats were first made, because the European Commission has got a role and a responsibility to make sure its member states, including France, abide by the law and abide by the terms of the agreement that was reached. We've also summoned the French ambassador, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, is going to raise these issues with her and ask her to explain and give an account of what they intend to do. We don't know what they'll do. They say they wouldn't introduce these measures until Tuesday, probably at the earliest. So we will see what they do. But obviously, if they do bring these into place, well, two can play at that game. And, we obviously, reserve the ability to be able to respond in a proportionate way.
Let me just pick you up on that point, the French ambassador being summoned. What's happened? He was summoned last night. What's come of it?
Well, the normal protocol on this is, I would expect at some point over the next day or so that the ambassador would meet the Foreign Secretary. That is, that is generally what happens. It's also possible that the Prime Minister will have an opportunity to meet President Macron, obviously, because they'll both be gathering, getting ready for COP26. We want to defuse this issue, but the truth is we've not done anything wrong. We've abided by the terms of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And nearly 1,700 EU vessels have been licensed to fish in our waters. We've granted them very generous access. There's a small percentage, just 2% of the applicants who don't qualify, and that's what we're talking about here. And so the reaction that France have come up with is really totally disproportionate.
Now, we're just hearing that the French agricultural minister has just been speaking on French TV, saying that there's been no progress at all between the UK and France. Why is he saying that? Clearly nothing is happening, nothing is going forward.
Well, what's happening is that we've applied the terms of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And so Jersey decided on Monday that the approach that they would take, they communicated that to France and the Commission on Tuesday. That was announced yesterday in the end. But there were, as I said, around 163 vessels that had access to Jersey waters that were entitled to a licence. They've granted those licences, some of them on an interim basis until January while more evidence is gathered. But there are 55 French vessels that had applied for access to Jersey waters but couldn't demonstrate a track record during the reference period, so they just hadn't been accessing Jersey waters. It might be understandable that they'd like the option to at some point in the future, but that's not what was agreed, and all parties understood what was agreed through that Trade and Cooperation Agreement.
I mean, from what you've said, France's government claims that its country's fishermen lack half the licences that they required to fish in British waters, and they're owed them after Brexit. Is that true?
No, that's simply not true.
Why are they saying that then?
Well, they've been granted, as I said, close to 750 licences. What we're talking about here is around 55 licences in the context of Jersey that haven't been issued and haven't been granted, but that's because they don't qualify. So they're not entitled to those licences. That's why they've not been granted one. But what we have done is been very generous so far. Jersey offered interim licences to those vessels while they gathered the data. So they've been very reasonable and pragmatic. They didn't really need to do that. There was no obligation on them, but they've been quite generous in their approach. Here in the UK, for access to our inshore waters, we've also worked very closely with the Commission and with the French to try and help them understand the data that they'd need to offer. We've even used data that we have to try to understand better individual applications that have been put forward. So we've been entirely reasonable throughout on this. We've issued licences as soon as we've been able to. And as I said, to around 1,700 EU vessels overall.
Let's pick up on that word you said, that reasonable. I think the French, looking at deals like the AUKUS agreement, may think that the UK has been unreasonable. Do you think that tensions from that is playing a part here?
Well, look, it shouldn't, because even that agreement, that was about three big allies, the US, the UK and Australia, working together on a, defence and cooperation project focused specifically around the Pacific. So, again, I know the French had some issues with that, but it's really not sensible to say that major allies like the UK and US and Australia shouldn't be able to come to such agreements. How
much of this would you say is political grandstanding? Because obviously Macron has elections coming up next year.
Yeah, well, look, there are elections coming up in France. I've seen suggestions that might be a factor. But, we have to deal with what we're faced with here, which is really France threatening some actions that are completely disproportionate, not acceptable, would be a breach of the agreement that we have with them. And that's why we're going to be raising that with their ambassador and raising it with the Commission.
So one of the things that you've obviously talked about how you want to deal with this and the measures that you hope to put in place to deal with this. But what if France doesn't actually take on what you're saying? What then? What happens if relations and tensions completely break down?
Well, look, we'll obviously be dealing with the European Commission, and it's important to note that because, France is an EU member, so the European Commission represent them on these matters. We'll be dealing with the European Commission on this, pointing out to them and explaining that we've issued now 1,700 licences, that's 98% of all the applicants, explaining to them and sharing with them the data so that they can understand that remaining 2% just didn't qualify under the terms of the agreement. I think the Commission will understand that. And obviously then, it's for the Commission to try to manage, those relations with France and explain that to France.
This doesn't bode very well, does it, for Johnson and Macron when they meet at COP26 in just a few days' time?
Well, look, in international relations, there are countries that you will sometimes have differences with on individual issues. But I think the whole world will want to be coming together to address the big challenge of climate change. And so there are going to be ministers there from China, from Russia, many other countries around the world who we're seeking to build agreements with. And I think when it comes to climate change, everybody recognises that whatever differences we might have on other aspects of international policy or domestic policy or fishing policy, we all put that to one side in order to address this really big challenge of climate change.
OK, let's talk about Insulate Britain, because the High Court order against them is clearly not working. They're still ignoring the injunction and they're stopping people from going about their day-to-day lives and activities. So what is it that you're going to do to stop them from what they're doing?
Well, the Home Secretary announced a few weeks ago some plans to strengthen the law in this area so that we can strengthen the penalties and give the police more early intervention powers in cases like this. But at the moment, there is that injunction in place. If they're in breach of that injunction, then they're in contempt of court, and the police do have the ability, therefore, to arrest them and take action.
But they're ignoring the injunction. It's not having any effect on them whatsoever.
Well, and if people ignore an injunction, then they are at that point in contempt of court. So the injunction is there for a purpose, which is to give the police the ability to make arrests and then move to contempt of court proceedings for those who are in breach of the injunction.
Let's talk about go back to COP26 as well. Boris Johnson has said this week that it's touch and go. If it's successful. And do you feel the same? Does this week's budget really help at all?
Well, look, these events, because they are big multilateral events with many countries, it is often difficult to get progress. We've been working incredibly hard, though, on our agenda, which is getting more countries to commit to net zero by the middle of the century, getting commitments on decarbonising transport and particularly electrification of cars, and in my case working quite hard on a package around forests, mobilising finance and getting agreement on reducing and halting the net loss of forests around the world. So I'm optimistic about these agendas, but always, obviously, when we're in the final days and the build-up to it, you do get nervous about whether you'll get things over the line, certain agreements over the line. There's more to be done at the actual summit itself. I'm optimistic, but it is, as the Prime Minister said, touch and go.
Eustice, Environment Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your time in Sky News. Still to come, we'll be speaking to the chair of the Health and Social Care Committee, Jeremy Hunt, as a new report calls on the government to improve care for dementia patients. The First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, joins us as he tightens some COVID restrictions. And as France threatens further action against British fishermen in the Channel, we'll be joined by the Shadow Environment Secretary, Luke Pollard, just after 8 o'clock. Now, the woman behind the Paris Climate Agreement has criticised the government's decision to cut taxes on some short-haul flights in this week's budget. Just days before the COP26 summit, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, halved air passenger duty on domestic flights. Christina Figueres, the former head of the UN Climate Change Convention, has told Sky's science and technology editor, Tom Clark, that the decision was very disappointing.
Sadly, it is the wrong signal, and it's the wrong time for that signal. It's definitely not the flag that the UK wants to walk in with to COP26. So that was honestly very disappointing. The way that it lands internationally is not good. And I do think that the Prime Minister is going to have some explaining to do in COP.
How important is that image for making a successful COP?
I do think that the COP presidency has done a brilliant job of bringing countries together and staying neutral. To the first task of holding the torch, that remains to be seen.
And as leaders arrive in Glasgow from around the world, we'll have special coverage of the COP26 UN Climate Summit. That's from 5 p.m. on Sunday night here on Sky News. And for uninterrupted coverage of the summit, including special guests and analysis, you can watch Sky News Climate Live on channel 525 from 10 a.m. on Monday. And also on the great debate on Monday night, we'll be asking if it's already too late to stop the climate crisis. As world leaders gather in Glasgow, we'll discuss what COP26 can really achieve and the steps that governments, businesses and individuals can take to prevent runaway global warming. Join our virtual audience and have your say by emailing thegreatdebate@sky.uk. And of course, do tune in at 9 p.m. on Monday. Now, also making the news this morning, Facebook has changed its corporate name to Meta as part of a major rebrand. The company said it was broadening its reach beyond social media into areas like virtual reality. We'll be speaking to Facebook's Vice President for Northern Europe at 8:30. But this is how the Chief Executive, Mark Zuckerberg, revealed the changes in a broadcast last night.
Building our social media apps will always be an important focus for us. But right now, our brand is so tightly linked to one product that it can't possibly represent everything that we're doing today, let alone in the future. Over time, I hope that we are seen as a metaverse company. And I want to anchor our work and our identity on what we are building towards.
The armourer responsible for weapons on the film set where actor Alex Baldwin accidentally shot and killed a cinematographer has insisted that she always worked safely. In a statement, 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez-Reed insisted that she would never allow anyone to use a live round. She said weapons were locked away at night and says there's no way guns were unaccounted for or used by crew members. President Joe Biden has arrived in Italy for a meeting of G7, G20 leaders. The Chinese President Xi Jinping, along with Russia's President Putin, are expected to attend a two-day meeting virtually. Now, there's concern that low-paid and insecure workers are at greater risk of exploitation because of the pandemic. A campaign group focused on labour exploitation claims that a large number of people had their wages withheld during the lockdown. Our business correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports.
The throng of cities, the matrix of modern life, is propped up by people whose work is insecure. But in the shadows, there's exploitation, and it's gotten worse. Shortly after dawn, Ivan commutes to glassy West London. Originally from Ecuador, he's a cleaner and paid below the London living wage. Since the pandemic, when some staff were let go, he claims his workload has doubled for no extra pay. He was harassed if he took a break and wasn't even allowed to leave the building while on shift.
Empezaron a intimidarnos de la manera de vigilarnos, que no nos sentemos, que estemos totalmente visibles todo el tiempo.
It must have been very stressful for you.
Pasamos un tiempo mal y estresados, o sea, no solo yo, sino mis compañeros. Nosotros venimos a trabajar, a ganarnos nuestro sustento. Nosotros no venimos a hacer otro tipo de actividad.
Stories like his are often obscured, but not unusual. In fact, nearly half of precarious workers surveyed by their unions said they'd had pay withheld at some point in the year to July. A quarter were forced to accept worse terms. 1 in 5 were too scared to take time off sick. And there were also more reports of sexual harassment. Early lockdowns and job losses left workers with few alternatives and therefore fewer choices. Recent labour shortages might imply that there are more options for workers, more bargaining power. But for the most vulnerable, that simply isn't the case. The pandemic's offered some employers the excuse to embed exploitative practices. And for those who simply can't afford to take even a week unpaid or who don't speak English, the risks are simply too high. This is compounded, say experts, by inadequate safety nets, very low statutory sick pay and delays in benefit payouts.
When the system allows poor behaviour happens. There are good, secure jobs at the top, and then you have this other class of workers, essentially, who don't have those protections, who are low paid, they don't have protection against unfair dismissal, they don't get redundancy pay, they don't have proper sick pay.
As the winter and spiralling cost of living sets in, the fear of fighting back will entrench. Times may be tight for employers, but the unseen and the vulnerable should not bear the brunt. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News.
Well, time for that all-important question, the weather. What's it got in store for us? Well, early rain will turn increasingly showery today before mostly clearing to leave showers in the southwest, so you will definitely need your brolly. Now, local flooding remains a concern in southern Scotland, Wales and western parts of England. It's a mild start for many with bands of rain around, but East Anglia and Kent are dry. Central and Western Ireland look fine too, if chilly in some spots. Much of Scotland, Wales and northwest England will see prolonged rain through the morning. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, we'll talk to the chair of the Health and Social Care Committee, Jeremy Hunt, as a new report calls on the government to improve care for dementia patients. Welcome back. The Environment Secretary says France is unjustified in seizing a British trawler and demanding more licences to fish in the Channel. And the French ambassador to the UK has been summoned to a meeting at the Foreign Office by the Foreign Secretary. Well, within the past few minutes, George Eustice told us he wanted to defuse the situation.
Well, look, we think that the comments that have been made by France on this are, completely disproportionate. They're unacceptable. The things that they are suggesting doing, which is basically start to be difficult at the borders and close ports and so on. This is a clear breach not only of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've got with them, but also of EU law, the official control regime. And so we don't really think it's justified at all, because this is a very small number of vessels that just don't qualify under the terms of the agreement that was reached. And so what we're asking France to do is obviously try to calm this down and remove these threats. They're not acceptable.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who joins me here in the studio. Rob, good morning to you. So what do you make of George Eustice's tone?
I think he is being diplomatic. I think he is trying to take the high ground, talking about working with France to try and get these licences sorted. But I think amongst all of that, you can detect some quite hard language in there. He talked about France's reaction being disproportionate, about it being unacceptable, a breach of the Brexit deal, a breach of EU law as well. And crucially, when you asked him about what retaliation might look like from the UK, what the UK would do if the French went through with these threats to gum up ports and to stop British boats landing on the French coast, he said, well, two can play at that game. So that suggests that the UK would consider doing something similar if the French did carry through with that. Now, Lord Frost, the Brexit minister, convened a meeting last night where some of those options of what the UK might do were discussed. I think a lot depends now on what happens between that meeting with the French ambassador and the foreign secretary, which is going to take place later today. I think if nothing productive comes out of that and the French do go through with these threats on Tuesday, you could see something coming back from the UK side. I think behind the scenes, though, the UK are pretty confident about the fact that they believe they have done everything by the book. They say they've been open and transparent about the process. And in this case, it is the French, they believe, that are definitely in the wrong. But we will have to see how this plays out. It also hasn't gone unnoticed that the EU Commission hasn't stepped in to back up France. And I think what the thought is on the UK side is that the French might be out on a limb here.
Great point there. Rob, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, more money from the government's new health and social care levy should be dedicated to dementia patients. That's according to MPs. The Health and Social Committee says that the new tax will not be enough to improve standards of care. Well, I'm joined by Jeremy Hunt, who's the chair of the Health and Social Care Committee. Thank you very much indeed for your time here on Sky News this morning. Now, firstly, you're calling for a £7 billion annual increase in funding for social care by 2023 to 2024. That's a long way off what the Chancellor's given, isn't it?
Well, good morning, Vanessa. Yes, we believe, and I think everyone knows, that the social care sector is in radical need of an overhaul. We welcome the health and social care levy as a step in the right direction. But as we've unpacked how much of that is going to the NHS and how much is going to the care sector, of the £12 billion, only about £2 billion is going to the care sector. Our particular focus this morning is on the 850,000 families in the UK who are looking after someone with dementia. That's a huge number of people. And what we're really saying to the government is, we welcome the step that's been made, we welcome the cap on care costs, but none of this is going to make a difference in the next 3 years. And there are lots of things the government could do much sooner than that would make a really big difference.
Were you disappointed by the Chancellor's budget for social care?
Well, I think it is a low amount for the social care sector in the short term. It's about 2 billion, just under 2 billion extra a year. And we say, as you said earlier, that the budget for the sector needs to go up by around £7 billion a year by the end of the Parliament. That is because of the good news that we are all living longer. But it means that there are a lot of very vulnerable people, and people with dementia is perhaps the example that we all understand the most, and there really isn't a family that hasn't got someone who's been affected by dementia or a friend who's been affected by dementia. And so we just want to raise the red flag, really, and say, for families that are really struggling in this situation, we need more support. Sajid Javid has promised a white paper on social care before the end of the year. What we want is a long-term plan that looks at the support we give for families with dementia. And the other thing, Vanessa, is how are we going to recruit the extra 620,000 staff the care sector are going to need by the end of this decade? That's something we really need to give urgent consideration to.
Well, doesn't some of this lack of funding come from your own time in government? Because once upon a time, you were Health Secretary.
Yes, I'm now talking about my successor's successor. So it's becoming further back, but you're absolutely right. We had a very difficult period of austerity when I was Health Secretary. I fought hard for a 10-year plan and long-term funding settlement for the NHS and the social care sector. I was successful for the NHS. I was told the social care sector would come next. And then in fairness to the government, we had the fall of Theresa May's government, Brexit, general elections, a pandemic. So it has been interrupted, I think, that process by events beyond the government's control. But now it's beginning to happen. And we've got this health and social care levy. We've got this white paper coming up. So it's really an opportunity to address these long-standing issues. And that's what we really hope Sajid Javid will do.
Mr Hunt, I'll just move you away from social care very briefly, because you visited Richard Ratcliffe, who's, of course, on hunger strike, and you were Foreign Secretary when his wife, Nazanin, was detained. How is he doing?
Well, I have to say, he's a very, very brave man. I went and delivered some coffee to him. He's allowed to have black coffee on his hunger strike, but nothing with milk or sugar. And he has fought tirelessly for 5.5 years since Nazanin's been detained. But the thing that's different about Richard is that he decided right from the outset to go public about his campaign, even though the advice that him and the other families were receiving was not to go public. And what that's meant is the whole world has come to understand Iran's hostage taking and the way they are grabbing innocent people, putting them in prison as a pawn of diplomatic leverage. And whatever the disputes are between countries, we should never make the lives of innocent families dependent on solving a diplomatic dispute. This is going right the way back to the 19th century. So I know he met the Foreign Secretary, I think, yesterday. I don't know how that meeting went, but I know that she's actively engaged. And I think we are all just hoping and praying that Nazanin does not have to go back to prison.
Jeremy Hunt, Chair of the Health and Social Care Committee, thank you very much indeed for your time on Sky News.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to social care, because joining me now is Joanne Luxton, who's a care manager at the firm Pro Medica 24. Thank you very much indeed for your time here on Sky News this morning. Now, you've been caring for patients with dementia for 16 years. What do you make of the Chancellor's budget for social care?
Any money into the system is good, but it needs to be regulated, looked at where it goes. We need help for families with dementia. There isn't much help out there, and it's a very difficult time when you're struggling with a loved one who's got dementia and you're trying to find help, support, and it's very difficult. There's nowhere to go. Nobody directs you when you've got that diagnosis. You get the diagnosis and that's it in a lot of cases. So yeah, any money to the system's good.
And also, I also have to say that you cared for your own grandmother for quite a number of time as well. How has the situation with dementia care changed during your time working in the sector?
I don't think it has. From what I'm seeing from we're a living care company and we provide carers that go in and live with them. Families are really struggling to find that that's an option. It is a very good option. It's very difficult to do because when you say dementia patient, one size doesn't fit all. It's very individual and it needs to be personalised to that individual and the family's needs. So it is a very difficult subject to deal with because no two people are the same. So I haven't seen much change since my nan was diagnosed, and we really struggled to find help.
I was just going to ask you about that, Jo, actually. What was it like trying to get that help and support for your nan?
Difficult, very difficult. Basically, we got the diagnosis and the only option we were told about was a care home. And that was it. And then you were just left to deal with it.
Just tell us, what does... Oh, I'm so sorry, Jo. I hope to cut you off there. I mean, just picking up on, the care that you had for your nan. What does dementia do to a family?
You don't become a family anymore. You become carers. It is very difficult. You struggle because you remember the person that was there, but they're no longer like that in a lot of cases. And you struggle to deal with that. You've got guilt because a lot of people have to ask for help, so you feel guilt because you're asking for help when you should be doing it yourself. It's like a grief as well, because that person's gone. Every now and again they're there, but in a lot of cases they completely change their personality, and you'll struggle to deal with that. And it's very difficult to deal with as a family.
Jo, we really appreciate your time on Sky News this morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you too. Thank you. Well, let's get all the latest on the sport now. Here's Jackie.
Chase the pack, achieve your goals, and unlock rewards. Live life with Vitality and Zwift, the app that makes indoor cycling fun. This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality and Zwift.
It's no surprise to anyone. You love the club. When did that start, you in Liverpool?
When I was in Chelsea, then I came here, the atmosphere was unbelievable. Then I said, wow, I want to play here one day. And that's why when I was in Rome, and there's talk between the clubs, and I was like, I will go there. I would love to play there. The atmosphere is unbelievable. I want to come back to England to prove people wrong, and I didn't have my chance there, Chelsea, so I will go back for sure. So I came back. Also, when I was young, I was playing with Liverpool in PlayStation, so it's like there is kind of emotional between us, or between me and the club, so I just I'm gonna go.
So with that in mind then, the fact that it was a bit of a dream to come here, everything you've achieved, how much longer do you see yourself in the red of Liverpool? You know it's a topic at the moment.
This is not dependent on me, but if you ask me, I would love to stay until last day of my football, but I can't say much about that, not in my hand.
Okay, can I ask you what it does depend on then?
Depend on what the club wants, not depend on me. At the moment, I can't see myself ever play against Liverpool. That will make me sad, and it's hard. I don't want to talk about it, but it will make me really sad if at the moment I don't see myself play against Liverpool. But let's see what will happen in the future.
What's left for you? You've now been Player of the Year in the Premier League, African Player of the Year. You've won the Champions League. You've won the Premier League. 30 next year.
Yeah, I think.
What more can you do?
I can do a lot. That's why I'm always focused on the game, just to show some people that I can play in top level for many, many years. I think I'm in top shape as well. Can play until 38, 39. I'm not worried about that.
39?
Yeah. Until my kids say, hey, come play with us, leave the football.
That would be nice. Do you think can top players go on longer now? Whereas before it might have been 32. Do you feel like 30 sort of being the beginning of the end?
Live life with Vitality and Zwift, the app that makes indoor cycling fun.
Jackie, thank you very much indeed. Now, President Biden is in Italy to meet G20 leaders as he prepares to head for the COP26 summit in Glasgow. As he travelled to Europe last night, Mr. Biden promised to make the largest effort to combat climate change in US history, but he needs support in Congress to make it happen. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner has been to West Virginia and the former mining town of Beckley.
I do not believe that we will ever see probably green energy take over the world.
Are you aware of COP26?
I know that I'm not aware of that particular conference.
Do you think we're in the midst of a climate emergency?
I think that it's a cyclic natural event caused by rotations of the sun.
Rural West Virginia is a long way from Washington and even further from Glasgow. But these are the people President Biden has to convince at home if he's to become the global leader on climate change. He's now arrived in Europe with wife Jill, pledging $500 billion to transition to clean energy.
Billion metric tons of emission reductions, at least 10 times bigger on climate than any bill that has ever passed before.
But Biden may yet turn up to COP26 with empty promises, unable to get his own party to vote for his plan. A last-ditch attempt to unite Democrats on his wider spending bill was ultimately unsuccessful. The bigger issue, though, is uniting a country on climate change and weaning America off coal and gas and onto renewable energy. Nowhere is that challenge more pronounced than West Virginia. A state built on black gold, now devastated by its decline. These coal workers and activists discussing how to rebuild their communities. What do people make of President Biden and his climate agenda, his climate plans?
West Virginia probably is not the most enamored with some of his rhetoric. The ideas that they're just going to shove it down somebody's throat, it's not going to fly here.
President Biden wants to be the world leader on tackling climate change. In Glasgow, there'll be big numbers and bigger ambitions. But at home, diversifying from coal and gas remains bitterly divisive. Even in places devastated by extreme weather.
Where we're standing now is completely underwater. These houses and these churches were all flooded.
Angie campaigns for clean water access in West Virginia. She hopes COP26 will be a breakthrough.
It is a marker to say the United States is ready to make a commitment on climate, a big commitment. I'm hopeful that West Virginia and the rest of the world will take note of that and follow that.
President Biden knows the next week could define his presidency. America's climate credibility is on the line. His credibility as a diplomatic force is too. Martha Kellner, Sky News, West Virginia.
Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, joins us as he warns that COVID restrictions may have to be reimposed.
Anger at the police, anger at the government. It was from this chamber that Carlos Puigdemont declared independence in October.
I want to show other people what happened.
I'm Michelle Clifford and I'm Sky's Europe correspondent. It's not the aim of the smugglers to actually get people to UK shores, but simply into British waters. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. There are real concerns here now about whether the health system will be able to cope. Made by people who dare to challenge. Afternoon, Mr. Barnier.
I have no time for any polemics.
Does anyone know which particular parts of your body can be damaged by air pollution?
There'll be a mild start for many, with persistent rain affecting much of Scotland, North West England and Wales during the morning. The rest of England will turn more showery, whereas Ireland and Northern Ireland will be mostly dry and sunny. It'll be mild overall, windy again for England and Wales. The afternoon will see rain and showers clearing into the northeast, but more showers will follow into the southwest later. The unsettled conditions mean air pollution levels should remain low, with levels between 1 and 3 on the daily air quality index.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Let me just bring you some breaking news that we're getting in on that British trawler that was seized. The prosecutor says that the trawler did not have the required licence to operate in the French economic zone. That's according to Reuters. That's the news that we're just getting coming in now. And the captain of the British trawler will be called to court at a later date. We will, of course, keep you posted with all the latest. Now, Wales is set to tighten COVID restrictions after a significant rise in the number of people being treated in hospital with the virus. Anyone aged over 5 will have to self-isolate until they have a negative PCR test when someone they live with has symptoms or tests positive for coronavirus. Well, let's speak now to First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford. Thank you very much indeed for your time on Sky News this morning. Just firstly, just tell us more about those measures that you're due to announce later.
Well, we will be saying today that we have to do more here in Wales to bring those numbers down. We want more people to work from home. We want to make sure that people do the simple things of mask wearing in crowded public places. We'll be changing some of the arrangements in our schools to try to stem the flow of young people falling ill with the virus. And we will be asking people who are household contacts of someone who has tested positive to stay at home until they themselves have taken a PCR test. If it's negative, they'll be able to go back to school and to work. If it's positive, then they won't have been out and about spreading the virus to other people.
What's the age group of people who are getting ill?
Well, the bulk of people who are falling ill are still the younger age groups, but unfortunately, we are seeing growth in numbers spreading up the age ranges. So in the last week or two, we've seen a higher number of people over 60 falling ill with coronavirus. Still more young people, but the impact of the numbers we're currently seeing now being felt higher up the age range as well.
Ms Drakeford, you've had some of the tightest restrictions across the UK when it comes to COVID, but those figures are still not looking good. Is there something that you're doing wrong? Something clearly isn't working?
Well, I think there are some explanations of why we are in the position we're in today. Wales had a very successful vaccination programme, and it may be that we are seeing the waning impact of that initial vaccination earlier here in Wales because of our initial success. It's also the case that earlier in the summer, for weeks and weeks, Wales had the lowest level of coronavirus anywhere in the UK. And it may be that there's just a greater reservoir of people here in Wales waiting to be infected by the Delta variant, that's driving the numbers that we see today. What is certainly true is that numbers at this level are causing harm in the community, are driving more people into hospital, and we have to make a concerted effort over the next 3 weeks to bring those numbers down.
Now, the UK government at the moment isn't going near Plan B. So what I want to know is how much communication do you have with them and why are you taking a different approach?
Well, we do have opportunities to discuss this with the UK government. I have, from a number of weeks, been urging them to move to Plan B. It would certainly help us here in Wales to have a single communication that says across England and Wales, we are all taking this virus as seriously as we need to take it as we go into the autumn and the winter. In the end, ministers responsible for England make the decisions they make, and here in Wales, we make the decisions that we think are necessary for us. It does mean that we will take a more precautionary approach because we do not want to see people who need not fall ill, and we have to attend to the growing pressures on our hospital system as well.
Mr. Drakeford, there is a bit of confusion, and I think you'd forgive a lot of people for being a little confused, because Wales is following England's lead on removing all countries from the red list, but at the same time you want to tighten controls and bring in tighter measures. So the two just don't sync together, do they?
Look, I understand why they look to be different. The truth of the matter is that we wish the UK government took a more precautionary approach to international travel. But when they change the rules in England, in any practical sense, it's impossible for us to do anything different in Wales, because almost everybody from Wales who travels abroad or who returns to this country from abroad comes in through English ports and airports and then travels on to Wales. So in a practical sense, we can't make anything different happen there, although we wish the UK government took a different approach. When we can do things differently, when we have decisions that we can make effective in Wales, then we take them differently.
Mark Drakeford, First Minister of Wales, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.